Welcome to the Learning Can't Wait podcast, a Full Mind production. At Full Mind, our vision is to ensure every child has access to an exceptional education. Each episode, we will be joined by pathfinders within and around the education space who are bringing about transformational change on behalf of deserving students. I am your host, Hayley Spira-Bauer. Welcome back, everybody, to the Learning Can't Wait podcast sponsored by Full Mind. Y'all, I have to tell you that it's not every day I can interrupt a busy teacher's life to have them on the podcast. But when I do, it very much makes for the very best episodes. So today I'm honored, delighted, and excited to introduce to you two and soon to be three teachers on the Learning Can't Wait podcast. We have Ann Lewis, a Full Mind virtual educator teaching in Chester County, South Carolina. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So great to have you. And we have Heather Bookstaver, a fourth grade teacher in DuQuoin, Illinois, in DuQuoin Elementary School. Welcome, Heather.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here. It's nice to see you, Ann and Hayley.
I'm so excited you're here.
Taylor will be here in just a minute.
Well, I was just going to say we have a really special treat today because in just a few minutes, joining in the podcast will be Taylor Gump, a student teacher at DuQuoin Elementary School in DuQuoin, Illinois. And I think that I know that Taylor is going to have a very unique perspective to share with us. But let's go ahead and jump right in with Ann and Heather. I'm going to start with my typical first question, which is, how did you come to be the personal and professional version of yourself? Ann, I'll start with you.
Okay, thanks, Hayley. Well, it was a roundabout situation. When I was in high school, I never really liked school. And then I had an algebra teacher in ninth grade that I really struggled in the beginning, and he stayed with me and he helped me. And I decided by the end of my high school career that I wanted to be a teacher. I taught in both public and private schools. And when I was in college, it was interesting. I kind of put the cart before the horse, but when I went to college, I had a mentor there and ended up being Student Teacher of the Year. And from there, my first job, again, had a wonderful group that I worked with that taught me a lot, ended up becoming one of 25 teachers in the country that was accepted into a teacher's mathematics program that taught me a lot about hands-on learning, that helped me understand why it was so difficult to teach math to kids, because I was one of those kids that was very difficult to teach to. So it was a long time coming. It was a long road. It was a long process. But teaching in school was wonderful. And of course, then we hit COVID. And I had actually taught college online, so I was one of the few teachers in my high school that actually had done online learning. So I became everybody else's mentor. And I loved it so much that I decided that I really didn't want to be in a building anymore, that I felt there were so many thousands of students that needed some sort of alternative learning, and kind of found Full Mind through the back door, and here we are. And I've taught with Full Mind now for a couple of years, both in a regular, not so rural situation, and this year in a very rural situation. And it's been a great experience. And I'll turn it over to Heather, and I'm sure we'll talk later about the interesting perspective of the difference between a rural and non-rural teaching environment.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you, Ann. I have been teaching in this district for 32 years. I'm just about to finish my 32nd year. I have had many student teachers, but the one that I have this year is my favorite. I'll tell you that before she gets here. I don't want her to get a big head. I still have to give her a grade. And I started out teaching my very first year. I was teaching with my mother and my father in the district, and my father in the building that I was in.
Wow.
Before that, every school that I attended as a student had one of my parents in it. So all three of my parents, by the time I got to high school, my stepdad was there, and I never skipped school. But I tried really hard not to be a teacher, because in a rural small town, it's not like everyone lives on a farm, but there are lots of, like there were guys that would drive to school with their duck boat in the back of their truck, or their four-wheeler in the back of their truck. But I tried really, really hard not to be a teacher, because I did not like being a teacher's kid. I vowed that my kids were not going to be teachers' kids, but I also knew that I couldn't work in an office. That was not for me. So I started in college in sports medicine, and I tried on lots of hats, and I was called. I was called to education, even though I didn't want it. I knew that's where I was needed. So when I student taught first grade, and then when I was hired, I started with middle school. At that time, it was called Title Reading and Math, and I got to third grade. I was there for 25 years, and I moved to fourth. I've been here for 5. I've just spent my whole life in my hometown, and given a lot to the community and the families that are here that I've known all my life. But it is different for me, because my family is not a native family. We moved in. My parents were both from Chicago area and came down here to SIU to school. So I didn't have those same family connections. I didn't have cousins that I was going to their birthday parties, and there were 75 relatives there at your birthday party. I didn't have that. And so I've had to learn and adapt and adjust, because the way that we conducted our home life was different from the people around us. And I had to learn to be rural, because my parents weren't.
Wow, both of you have shared some beautiful stories of how you found your way into the classroom. And I appreciate your vulnerability in sharing that you didn't like school until you found people that believed in you. And that is so many people's stories. And Heather, it really is. And Heather, sometimes you just can't avoid your calling. Your calling finds you. So that story is very beautiful and reminds me a lot of my own story to education. But I'm not here to tell that story. I'm here to talk to you and have you both share insights about teaching in rural America. This mini-series is focused on really the beauty of rural communities across America, some of the challenges, the innovation that is born in rural America. And so I'm excited to dive in a little bit more deeply and talking about what makes rural America so unique and special. Heather, will you take that question first?
Sure. I think, first of all, it's just knowing everybody. If you don't actually know them, you've seen them, or you know somebody that does know them. So having that safety of less strangers is really kind of a driving force behind what this is all about, and how our classrooms are conducted, how our relationships are formed with our students and with our fellow staff.
a lot of folks talk about the relationships and the community and the collaboration. Now, Anne, you're not living in the rural environment you're teaching. You're kind of satellite in. So what's your perspective about what makes rural America beautiful?
That's a great question. And having worked remotely in both rural and non-rural environments, I was amazed at the difference. And what I find in working in a rural community, the technology can be a challenge, but the workarounds are really unique and wonderful. With a rural environment and technology, there are certainly issues that could occur during the day, but the kids are so flexible. We manage to get through those little blips that happen during the day. But one of the most important things I have found is it's very challenging to assume that students are able to connect outside of school. So when students have the need for extra help, they may or may not have the ability to connect their laptops or computers at home. So we found out that FaceTime works really well. For some reason, their phones connect them to the outside world with no issues whatsoever. So we group chat on FaceTime. We're able to do extra help. We figured out ways to share documents. I can send students to different sites to help them to solve problems. And I think having that ability and being able to work around situations with rural area makes it so much more unique and so much more fun for the students. And the students have come up with some really neat ideas and really unique workarounds that don't exist in an area where technology is not an issue. Right. And it's really funny because sometimes during class, the technology will just blip out. And all of a sudden, they'll come back in and they'll go, we're back, Miss Lou. Let's get going. I mean, they're just great about it. And you don't see that happen with that much enthusiasm in a school that doesn't experience that kind of lapse. So it's kind of nice to see. And I don't know, Heather, if you experience that type of thing within your school.
Absolutely. COVID flipped us on our butts. I'm just going to be honest. We weren't even a one-to-one school. We did not have the technology available, and certainly not everyone had technology that they could access from their home. So our administrators and our teacher teams did have to get creative. We had lots of community support. So we had to set up several technology hubs where places where they could access the internet, and we got grants and different ways to boost those areas so more people could park their cars outside the library and access the internet at any hour. McDonald's opened its internet wider to accommodate more people logging on. We also had different hotspots that we could give to families that maybe had 3, 4, 5 children in the school system, all needing to be online at the same time, and just didn't have the
bandwidth.
The bandwidth, right. Yes, that's the word. And so we were stuck between March and May, and hustled over the summer. And then we checked out we didn't think we would have to check out as many as we did, but we ended up checking out about 75% of our devices to families. So that gave us a real picture of how little access they had. But the creativity is what brought us through, and the willingness to just participate, jump in, do what needed to be done, find a way, ask somebody. And if you ask, there's a lot of times, I don't know if it's a rural thing because I've not lived in the city, but if you ask someone for help, they're going to help you. Like, it would be very rare for someone to say no. So that kind of knowing each other, that kind of relationship with your neighbors was really important to get us through that really critical time.
You know, can I, real quick, I want to just add that you all are harping on a theme for this mini-series, which is that necessity is the parent of invention. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we can say holistically that every rural school is one thing or another. Every rural school is not connected or disconnected from technology or broadband or fiber optics. Like, there's a spectrum, just like everything. However, the connectivity issues that exist in rural America are not the same as those that exist in more urban settings. So right. I want to name that. And I love that this came back up again authentically, that innovation, rural schools are no stranger to innovation.
Right.
And I love what you said about patience and how your students are so patient and innovative. And then Heather, you jumped on there and you added a lot of color here about your school itself and how you identified a problem real quick in COVID, as many schools did, and you found a solution. That really speaks to me about what is beautiful and unique about rural environments.
Yeah. And since we were not a one-to-one school, we hadn't even set up Google Classroom in a real way. Some grade levels only had iPads, which are, not quite as friendly for that platform. And so that year I did 80 hours of training on technology. I took Google classes. I took everything that the technology hub could throw at me just so I could keep up, because I didn't have that warm up to COVID. I had a, stark contrast. I just jumped in the icy water and had to swim.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, Heather, because in this particular school, they used a completely different platform that I had ever used before. The kids actually were better at it than I was. So I would ask the kids, okay, I put this up in this group. Is that okay? And they went, no, Miss Lou. All right, let me walk you through this. So they would show me, because
how old are your students?
Yeah, they couldn't use, are you familiar with a program called Cami, where the kids can type into the programs? Yes. Well, they can't use it in that school.
Oh, so, we bought Cami that year, and right. I was trying to get my fourth graders to write on worksheets like that, and with a trackpad, it was difficult, and so I had to abandon that. But Cami did have its uses during that time. So, especially the split merge option, I could make packets out of anything. I could make a set of slides really quickly. So there were things that we just had to find. And then during our grade level meetings and things, we were just saying, hey, I did this. And we were just sharing and building on the experience and just learning as we go, just like our kids.
Yeah, the problem that we had was the system would not allow them to use Cami, so we had to find a workaround for that. So when I was uploading documents for the kids to work with, they'd go, okay, Miss Lou, we're going to walk you through this again. We can't do that. So you have to do this on your end, so we can do it on our end. And they were so good about teaching me what to do so they could be successful. And what I loved about these kids is when you talked about community before and how the community works together and how everybody knows each other, even though I was remote, I understood how close and tight-knit the community was with sports and band and community activities. So they were very active and involved after school. So if somebody couldn't get something done on time, they would email me or text me from the football field, from band practice, and say, Miss Lou, I'm here. I can't get it done, but I promise I will get it to you before class tomorrow.
Yeah.
I had kids in regular schools who would not do that for me. And these kids just go out of their way. And I find that it's that close-knit tightness that everybody knows everybody. There's one very funny story I'll share. I had one student in an advanced pre-calculus class, and all of a sudden I noticed this student was not handing in any work at all, no submissions. And I got very concerned because especially in a class like that, these kids are always submitting work. So I emailed one of the administrators and he emailed me back and he said, oh, I would definitely call the parent. And I said, well, I wanted to check and make sure that nothing was wrong. So I called the parent. Well, in the meantime, the administrator emailed me back and said, oh, it's okay. We found out she went to this other group and she's doing another project. Well, I had already left a message for the parent. So I immediately called the parent back. The parent was in a doctor's office, so she called me back. And I'm in class, and I said to the kids, hold on a second, I've got a parent on the line. They said, that's okay, Miss Lou, just put us on mute. So I'm talking to the parent, and I had left her the second message. So she called me and she said, it's okay, Miss Lou. I understand. I am so grateful you called, but my daughter is okay. I said, well, I just didn't want you to be upset.
And what you've highlighted here, though, is the powerful nature of the home to school connection. Yes. And rural schools, I will tell you, I am getting to know better and better, are very well known for that. As Heather, as you pointed out, you know, you had your family had to adjust to not being from a rural environment originally to becoming integral members. So Heather, talk to me about your lived experience now, being in a rural community, living in a rural community. What does the home to school connection look like on a daily basis for you?
It is, oh, Taylor's here.
Here comes Taylor.
Here comes Taylor. I'm going to scoot over. We'll be here together. Taylor, this is Hayley and Ann.
And the whole Learning Can't Wait audience. They're so excited you're coming. Heather's about to answer a question, but I'll jump over to you in a second so you can catch your breath.
So the connection that we have here is somebody always knows the situation or some kind of background. Like, we have incredible secretaries that know who is related to who is related to who. And like, they can just step in the office and know, okay, well, if you can't get a hold of them this way, why don't you try? Because they took another job and they're working, you know, second shift now. And so there's always somebody that you know that can tell you something about somebody they know.
I love it. The small town feel, right? The small town feel.
Absolutely. And like stopping you in Walmart and saying, you know, like, there you are, like, you know, and they know you from kindergarten. No, you know, they'll point you out. That was so-and-so. That was your cousin so-and-so's teacher. That's Mrs. Bookstaver. Hi, Mrs. Book. And then you're like, hi, how are you? I mean, the idea of walking down the street and not knowing the person that you're passing, like in the city, that is foreign. That does not happen here.
I'll tell you that we rarely see my kids' teachers in the community, but we did see one not even a week and a half ago, or a few weeks ago, the day of the solar eclipse in New York. And we were looking for solar eclipse classes. We ran into one of my younger son's teachers, and he did not stop talking about it for weeks. He's still talking about it. It was like a celebrity sighting. I could only imagine the feeling of celebrity you get. Now, Taylor, I'm going to turn the microphone over to you because you are a celebrity in training for a few more days. Tell us, why did you choose to teach in rural America, and will you continue your career in rural America? What's next for you?
Yeah, so I don't really know why I chose to teach. I just really enjoyed elementary school whenever I was in it. And so that kind of just popped into my head, oh, I should teach elementary school just because I liked my teachers. And so then that kind of just brought me to babysitting. And then I started working at a daycare and working more with kids. And then I realized, okay, yeah, I do like teaching, and I do like guiding kids to wherever they need to be. And so that's kind of how I just wanted to be a teacher. I am from this area, so I kind of do want to stay in this area, but I do have a family that lives up north as well, near Chicago, so I could teach there as well if I wanted to. But I think I like the feel of a small town a lot more than a big town.
I love it, and I love that you get to share this fresh perspective. So I'm going to ask you another question, Taylor.
Okay, yeah.
So Taylor, what's it like as you become a teacher, working as a student teacher with someone that has the experience that Heather has? What are you learning from her? What are you excited to bring into your own classroom?
I have learned everything this semester, this year. Honestly, before student teaching, you're only in the classroom one day of the week. You don't really get to see a whole lot while you're there.
We had a unique situation, though. Her one day a week in the fall was also with me. So she got to see an entire year of kind of what happens in a classroom. She got to see the progression, which is, I really love that SIU has started to do that. So.
I have learned a lot about how I want to structure my students whenever they're working together, like in partners. I love group work. I love partner work. I love getting up and around the room. I don't like just sitting there doing a worksheet or a packet. So I try to get them up and moving whenever we can. And I'm sorry, I kind of forgot the question.
Don't be sorry. You're talking about what it's like. So I am getting a good picture, though, of what the experience is like. And Anne and Heather and I have already talked a little bit about technology. What role does technology play in schools in rural America?
A huge role. It's a lot of how we communicate to home. So we have Google Classroom that we use to post assignments, to keep in contact with parents. We also use Class Dojo to keep in contact with parents. I love using Ed Puzzles where they can watch videos and it stops them halfway through to ask them about what they just watched. So it's more than just, oh, here's a computer assignment. Like, I feel like they enjoy them more, and it's less work on the teachers. I mean, most of the time they grade them right then and there for you. Their responses on like whenever we respond using computer response compared to paper response is much different because...
Yeah. Why didn't you talk about the daily check-ins?
Oh, yes.
Because that has been a big eye-opener for us this year.
We've started using Google check-in forms for our social emotional connection in the classroom. So in the morning they'll come in and they'll check in about their mood, like what scale are you on from a 1 to 10? What is making you feel this way? Are you feeling worried, stressed? Did you sleep well last night? And like whenever we had cold weather, we said, do you have the proper amount of heat at home? Because some students were having to share their coats with siblings. So we wanted to know these things in case we needed
do you have enough blankets? I was prepared to go to Walmart and buy, $200 worth of blankets if my kids needed them.
Of course. And teachers lay it all out on the line. So, Anne, as you're listening to this, tell us what strategies you use to ensure you're meeting your students' social and emotional needs, given that you're virtual and your students are in person.
It's interesting. Being in a classroom face-to-face with kids is a whole lot different, I actually thought, than being virtual. I was wrong. I really was. Because whether it's rural or non-rural, I'm really amazed at the ability to connect with kids. In the school I was at last year, the kids were so funny. They asked if I could come to graduation. And I said, I was in North Carolina. And I said, well, guys, that'd be really great, but it's a little far for me to commute. I'm in Virginia.
Yes.
And this year, my juniors and seniors said, this was last week, they said, oh, Miss Lou, the prom is next week. Yes, I know. And they said, can you come? You could bring your husband.
Aww.
And I said, guys, I'm in Virginia. And they said, well, where in Virginia? I said, well, I'm in Northern Virginia. I said, let's all go on Google Maps and we're going to find where I am. And they said, how long will it take you to get here? I said, about 8 hours. They went, oh, wow, that's a little too far to commute. But I think what struck me was that, I'm sorry, my dogs are barking. I was amazed that they felt comfortable enough to even ask me, to think that it was okay to ask me, because you got to go to the prom. You got to be part of this. And I think
I've been invited to birthday parties before.
Yeah. And it's like there are times in these classes, we have block classes, so they're 90 minutes. And you certainly don't teach for 90 minutes, but we have time where we connect. I mean, every morning when class starts, there's a teacher in the classroom, so while she's taking attendance, hey guys, how's the weather down there? Cold, rainy, what's going on? And like in South Carolina, it could be 75 degrees. Well, up here, it's like 50. And they're going, is that why you're wearing a sweatshirt and turtleneck? Well, it's Friday, guys. It's dress down day, right? So we get to talk about things. If a girl walks in and I can see, because the technology they have for us seeing each other, it's pretty cool. It's called an owl. So it scans the room so I can see kids coming in and out. And if I see a girl or a guy just kind of coming in, kind of say, okay, what's going on? What happened? Or students will email me and say, I'm having trouble at home. So we'll do a side conversation.
And then those FaceTimes that you mentioned before, those sound like, this is the power of a teacher, Anne, Heather, and Taylor. Like, this is really the power of having students trust you with their lives.
Yeah.
So it's a given fact that they're trusting you with their education because they don't really have a choice about that. But what they disclose to you and what they share with you and what part you play in their lives, you all are sharing examples that are huge testaments to the safe space you have created for your students. And I just want to pause for a second and say, thank you. Thank you so much for doing this work, for being in classrooms, for committing the future rest of your career, or hopefully the rest of your career, Taylor, to being an educator just like Anne and Heather have. This is powerful.
Yeah.
Powerful.
And that power has changed over the 32 years that I have been teaching.
Yes.
I had more of an old school kind of beginning to my career, but especially since COVID, and we could do a whole nother podcast on how COVID changed me as an educator. But I needed so much social, emotional support, and it drained me so much in that way. I knew that my students needed it all that much more. And so since coming back from COVID, I have just kind of launched myself on this SEL journey, and I went through a program called Breathe for Change, which is created for teachers by teachers, and you end up with a 200-hour yoga license and a social emotional learning certificate. But it was basically 6 months of therapy and vulnerability from people all over the country who felt exactly broken like I did. And the things that we were learning to teach our kids, we were also learning to teach ourselves. And then I joined another group through that's sponsored through one of the hospitals in Chicago. And so we're making a REACH team and, making a plan and submitting that plan and getting funding for that plan so that we can better meet our students' social emotional needs, because they are so deep and varied, and especially in this rural area, we don't have access to the mental health that we need. I would categorize it as a barren desert of mental health. There aren't one doctor in the area has a caseload of 15,000 patients because there is no one else to go to.
Wow, Heather. Heather, you're calling upon, I think, personally, I would say this is like my personal viewpoint, the benefit of technology, one, in allowing teachers to receive the types of training that you might get in a well-populated, highly densely accessible, maybe college town, right? There's cities where you have 20 colleges in a location. You can take continuing education credits as a teacher. You might not have access to that. So technology permits you to receive the type of education that has now permitted you to better serve your students. But two, the mental health supports that would otherwise not be accessible in a rural community. And that's a shocking figure, 15,000 students on their caseload. And I can only imagine the pressure they feel to do right by their patients.
Yeah. It's interesting. Our daughter is a licensed psychologist in South, and she talks about her patient load relative to adults in the business world who have suffered from COVID as well. It's interesting, during COVID, I was retired. I came out of retirement because COVID convinced her. I'm an avid knitter. And COVID convinced me I'm never going to retire. For 3 months, all I did was knit. Oh my gosh. The grandkids,
I wanted to quit.
The in-laws, everybody
close
got
to the end,
stuff.
But not close enough. I had to stay. So just before COVID hit, in the fall of 2019, I was diagnosed the second time with ovarian cancer. So I went through it. I had my surgery, and I was out for 13 weeks. It was a big surgery. I came back to school literally one day, and all I did was throw my kids' books in their bags and, tell them I love them and out the door, hoping I would see them in 2 weeks, but knowing it probably wasn't.
Yeah.
And so then I was back-to-back cancer, COVID, and the impact of that is what broke me. Like I wasn't battered and bruised. I was broken. Like,
wow. And you know what? I know just how you feel because I'm a cancer survivor as well. Mine was long before COVID. but I'll tell you, it changes you, and it
Yes.
makes you appreciate relationships, what kids go through, and it makes you, I think, a more understanding person of people's individual differences. And I remember when I was in college, one of the things that my mentor in college told me is never forget to understand students' individual differences because they are all different. They all come with different baggage and different backgrounds, and you need to be aware of all of that when you are teaching.
I never forgot that. I heard the same messages, but it didn't ring true in the same way as when I had to experience it. When I was terrified to go to school because there was no COVID vaccine. And then when there was a COVID vaccine, students in 4th grade still couldn't get the COVID vaccine. And I'm trying to keep them masked and myself safe because my immune system is still
compromised, right?
Yeah. I to go and have to see them every day, knowing that I'm putting myself at risk every single day, changed me. And it changed the way I look at them and how I really see them. I don't just see them, I actually see them.
Yeah, and I think that's why the other reason I love teaching remotely is I don't have to worry about anybody being vaccinated or not, but and that's what I was referring to when we talk about the connections with kids is that I still feel that connection, even though I don't get the one thing I do miss is the hugs from the kids, but that's the only thing. Right?
I know. Hugs are the best.
Hugs are the best. So let me do this. I am feeling a lot of nostalgia right now from my time working in schools, teaching and leading. And I'm so grateful for the way that you all have shared your experiences working in rural schools. And I hate to do this, but we have some data that tells us our podcast listeners lose the ability to focus on the podcast after a certain amount of time. So I have to wrap with our last question, which is a bummer, but I feel very grateful that you all have shared your stories here today. The final question is, what advice would you give a teacher starting their career today in rural America? Anne, I'll start with you.
Just be yourself, be honest, don't try and fool the kids, and I don't care what anybody says, you can be their friend and still be their teacher.
Taylor, same question for you. Now you're about to become a certified teacher. So what advice would you give someone just starting their student teacher journey in rural America?
Wow, that's tough. I'm still learning a lot of things myself, but I would say always have a plan, be organized,
but always be flexible.
Be flexible. Yes, be flexible. Don't go into things thinking that every day is going to go this way, because it's not. Every day is different. Every child's different. You never know what you will run into whenever you go to school that day. So just take it day by day and don't be discouraged if something bad happens.
Incredible. That is such good insight from someone so new to the profession. And finally, last but not least, Heather, what advice would you give?
Well, I think I would say that you need to always look for the good. And I was telling Taylor this morning, that something that she has renewed in me by having another adult in the classroom all the time is something she does very, very well, is look for the good. And I think that throughout my career and the things that I've had to experience has kind of jaded me a little bit, kind of worn out that empathetic muscle that I have. And so just look for the good.
Amazing. Well, Heather and Taylor, thank you so much for coming on the Learning Can't Wait podcast today and sharing your perspectives and opinions about teaching in rural America. It has been a pleasure having you on as guests.
Thank you so much.
And thank you,
every weekend, everybody.
Have a great, well, when this airs, it might not be the weekend. It's going to be a Tuesday, but thank you to everybody for joining this podcast. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for listening to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and share this episode. Be the first to know when we have a new episode by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or have a suggestion for an episode, email us at podcast@fullmindlearning.com.